Good morning, everybody. This is George Kriza. We're happy to invite Dana Herra to be with us this morning. Dana is a branding expert with Herra Communications, her own company, and she's got quite a bit of experience in branding, personal branding, and other marketing related issues. So, Dana, welcome. And could you please take a few minutes, tell us a little bit about your career?
Sure. Thanks for having me, George. It's great to be here. So I'm a lifelong writer. I've been writing ever since I could clutch a crayon on my chubby little fist, telling stories. I'm in the 20th year of my writing career and actually getting paid to tell stories. I began as a journalist, then 10 years ago, stepped into marketing. Um, Now I specialize in ghostwriting and brand strategy and helping other people tell their stories in an authentic and compelling way.
Excellent. Well, so today we're going to spend some time talking about that, and particularly both personal branding and branding in the SMB or under $10 million revenue space. I think often it's underserved, but let's find out. Let's find out what your thoughts are. So first, perhaps we could take a few minutes to define personal branding. What's that all about? I think probably the average person never even thinks about personal branding.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't. Sort of the domain of people in our world. Um, so I think personal branding is largely misunderstood. Uh, it's been described as your reputation, which it kind of is, but it's more than that. It's beyond that. Um, it's how people describe you, what they're going to say you're an expert in, what you know about. Um, it's also the emotional and psychological reactions that you trigger in people. When someone thinks about you, what's the field, the industry, the expertise they think of, and how do they feel? Do they like you? Do they trust you? Do they think you're funny? Do they think you're really smart? You know, it's the whole package. It's your whole personality. Um, well, I can't say that. It's not your whole personality. It's the personality that you put forth. It's your public face. Um, and it's really how people describe you when you're not in the room.
So it sounds to me like all of that would be on the part of yourself, for most people, unconscious. Would you agree? So in other words, we are who we are, and as that's the case, we show up and be who we are. But I think you bring out some excellent points because whatever we think we are is not our personal brand. It's what others think we are. Would you say that's fair?
Absolutely. Brand is co-created between you and your audience. You cannot, by yourself, create your brand because you can choose what message you're putting out there, but you cannot determine how people are going to receive it. Um, you can put things in such a way that you are trying to evoke a certain response, but you can't control whether that response actually happens or not. It really is an act of co-creation. It's both what you're putting out and what they're picking up, which might not be the same thing.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, how do we move then from an unconscious uh, act of being who we are into the space of trying to add some sort of control or messaging into our personal brand?
That's a great question. Because the first thing that I would want to emphasize, because I think it scares a lot of people or puts them off of the idea, is that you should still be yourself. You're still showing up as you, you're still being authentic. Your personal brand is not some mask that you're putting on. It really is you. It's just the highlighted parts of you that are going to help you get what you want. Um, and that's really where you need to start is if you're going to develop a personal brand, start with why. I hate saying that, but start with why you want a personal brand. What are you trying to do? Because that's going to determine everything else. after that? Are you trying to build a personal brand so you can get a better job, or so you can publish a book and have an audience of people who want to buy it, or so you can impress your mother-in-law? Like, what is the reason that you want a personal brand? And you start there and kind of reverse engineer. All right, what steps do I need to take to get to that goal?
Okay. So that's a really broad context, isn't it? And I mean, from the where from today, for today and our discussion, I think the most relevant thing is going to be in some sort of business context. Uh, and again, to your point, maybe it's broader than that. But if I'm in a business context, even if I'm one person company, uh, where do I begin? How do we start to craft that personal brand? How do we implement it?
So you're still going to start by understanding your goal. And let me tell you a quick story. I was recently on a call with a gentleman, and we were talking about his position and his messaging that he was going to implement for his personal brand. And he was torn because he had two, and he liked them both equally, and he didn't know which way to go. Now, on the one hand, one of those positions and messages would have set him up to be viewed as a great consultant, somebody that a business brings in to fix a problem, and then he moves on to the next one. The other area of expertise that he liked to talk about would have positioned him as a great director of operations. So somebody that comes into a company long term, runs the department, manages the whole deal. So we still had to start with, okay, what's your goal? Long term, what do you want? Do you want to launch a consultancy or do you want to get a better job? And we talked about that at length, and just kind of worked through it before he said, I really don't want to be a consultant. I don't want to work for myself. I want to work for another company. I just want to be higher up and do a better job. We're like, all right. So from there, now we know what your goal is. Now we can decide what your position should be. So it starts with goal. Um, then there's I call it your one thing, right? All right. So what's the one thing that you want to be known for that's going to get you to that goal? What do you want to be known as an expert in? Uh, your audience, who can help you get to that goal? Who are you going to talk to? Like in his case, he needed to be talking to C-suite people who would hire somebody like him. He could put out a bunch of educational content for people that are below him on the totem pole. That's great. It'll be really valuable, but it's not going to get him where he wants to be. Uh, so all of those things all those pieces need to be in place before you get into the tactics, which is what everybody wants to skip to. Everybody wants to skip to, okay, so I just want to know, should I post on LinkedIn or start a YouTube channel? And really, you need those foundational pieces first. Like, all right, well, it depends on what you're trying to do and who you're trying to talk to.
That makes perfect sense. And it's interesting too that all of this is groundwork that has to happen before you have that initial interaction, or in the case of I don't know if it was a man or a woman that you were talking about, but uh, before you have your first interview with the CEO, uh, you have to have that all crafted so that your words, your actions, your messaging comes across harmonious with your goal.
Mhm.
A lot of it's interesting because plenty of people have aspirations, and you could wallpaper with aspirations, can't you? And I mean, I could say I want to be the president of General Motors, and the likelihood of that happening is not very good, in spite of all my wonderful qualities. So our aspirations are what our aspirations are, but we really need to be grounded in terms of what's realistic for us, because we wouldn't want to craft a personal brand that is significantly different from who we really are, to your earlier point.
Exactly.
So that's interesting. And so what kind of people would come to you to begin the process of crafting a personal brand?
Uh, People who can really benefit from the way that I help people Often it's people in leadership positions who are really good at their job and they've whether sometimes they own the company, sometimes they're just in the C-suite. They don't, it's not their company, but they've worked in it. They've helped to build it up and make it what it is. People in the company really respect them, but people outside their company don't know who they are. They have all this experience, all this knowledge, all this expertise, but nobody knows about it. We are living in a branding era, for better or for worse, where it used to be right now it's not what you know, it's who you know. And now it's who knows you, whether you know them or not. It's who's heard about you and who knows what you're all about already. So the people that come to me, they need people to know who they are. Some of those goals are sometimes they're planning an exit. Maybe they do run the company and they're looking out a few years down the horizon. They're like, yeah, I want to launch a consultancy. I want to retire from this and be a consultant. Or this is great, but I really want to found a new startup. But investors don't know who I am. I have this company behind me, but investors don't know who I am. So how do I separate? How do I go out and build my own credibility separate from the company? Some of them, as I said, they want to write books or they want to be a keynote speaker, and they need an audience of people who have heard of them, so that when that book comes out, people want to buy it. So when their name comes up on a speaker roster, people want to go. Uh, there's there's a lot of ways that a person could benefit from having a brand that's about them and not necessarily completely about the company that they work for.
So when someone does come to you, um, a few minutes ago, as you were describing the why, do you take them through kind of a workshop on this, or what would the process look like?
We absolutely start with what it is we're trying to achieve, um, because you can put a whole lot of effort and energy and time and money into a great process that isn't going to take you where you want to go. And there's just no point in that. Right? If you want to get to California, don't get on a train bound for New York. Um, so we start with the goal, and some people it's very clear. They know what they want. Some people are not so clear. Some people think that they're clear, but they're really not. They think they know what they need, but if we dig down a couple layers deeper, they're like, oh, actually, that's the thing that everyone tells me I should want. It's not really the thing that I want for myself. It's not what's going to make me happy. Um, then we kind of dig in to identify that one thing. What's your magic? What is your unique point of view that nobody else can copy, that no one else can uh, slap their name on because it's so clearly, obviously yours? We talk about who their audience is that's going to help them get to their goal. Um, what does that audience want from them? It's not enough to just talk to an audience. Once you know who they are, you want them to like you. You need to build trust with them. You have to get them to want to hear what you have to say. So there's a little bit of salesmanship in there, right? You need to know what the customer wants. And once we have all of that groundwork laid, then we start talking about, okay, what are the tactics that we can use to get you there? Should you be posting on LinkedIn? Should you be publishing articles in Forbes? Should you write a book? And we start getting into the nitty gritty and the details and the tactics. And that's going to vary from person to person. But every person needs to have those foundational pieces of who am I talking to? What am I saying to them? And how is it going to get me where I want to go?
So when you do get engaged with a client, what does it feel like? Is it a week? Is it a month? What does the relationship look like?
It depends on the level of the engagement. Um, I have some services that are just sort of a one-time, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. We get all those foundational pieces done. Like, okay, here's where you should be, here's your messaging, here's your positioning. Um, and then they go and run with it. Then there are longer term engagements where maybe it takes a month to lay the foundation. Some of it depends on where they're coming in from. How much of that foundation do you already have laid? Some people come in and they already have a small audience that we're just trying to build from. Um, and I'm a ghostwriter as well. Some of those engagements then end up being long term, where we make a content plan and then I'm actually creating the content in their voice and sending it to them so that they are sending the articles to Forbes or putting the posts on LinkedIn or sending the book to the publisher. Uh, but they didn't have to sit there and stare at the blinking cursor and wrestle with that piece of it.
Okay, got it. So, and just again, I'm kind of a novice, not so much branding, but on working with someone like yourself. So, if one of my clients wanted to work with you, what would their expectation be in terms of cost? What would be like the low end of an engagement? And I suppose on an ongoing engagement, it would be hard to put a cap on it. But what would be the typical range of expense that someone would expect to undergo this process?
Uh, the lowest end would be just getting a handle on message and positioning, none of the other ongoing pieces. And that's going to run you, not even to get to my own rates, but just on the marketplace, probably between $500 and $1,000 market rate. For deeper brand development, for actually developing that personal brand and checking in with a monthly accountability call, or a monthly content information gathering session, depending on the level of engagement, that could run anywhere from, oh, probably $2,000 a month to seven or $8,000 a month.
Okay, very good. But the price of getting started is quite reasonable, actually. And then I suppose someone can, make their own decision as they go as to just how deep they want to take the process. But I mean, I would never in any way not fail to recognize the importance of a personal brand. I think it makes a really big difference in terms of the perception of your target market or of your those people that you have to engage with in order to achieve your goal. So anyway, it sounds quite reasonable. Now, I'd like to segue a little bit on this from just being purely personal to this question. Do we have how do we think of a personal brand when we're already in a company? And maybe we're the CEO for the sake of argument, but how do we think of a personal brand in that context? Is it any different, would you say?
Um, Not really. Other than if you're, say, the CEO, if you are somebody whose name is going to be associated with the name of the company, um, it's you want to make sure that your brand and the company's brand are at least aligned. They don't have to be the same. You are not the company is not you. That's understood. You don't have to have the same brand. But your brands should not clash with one another. Uh, if you want to have a very opinionated, outspoken, uh, maybe angry or cursing is okay kind of a brand, but you're leading an organization that's about uh, Christian families, that's not going to work. Um, so you need to just at least align your brand with the company's brand. It doesn't have to sound the same, but you should have the same values. I guess that's probably a better way of putting it, is that make sure that your brand values and the company's brand values can cohabitate peacefully together.
Understood. And again, to some extent, I think this personal brand creation in a company is also either deliberate or unconscious. And I'll tell you, because I come from the technology industry, there are two individuals that strike me as terrific examples of a great and a not so great brand. And the great brand, probably almost 90% of the people would say Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was such a larger than life guy. And I think, on the one hand, he always dressed the same. He had a black uh, pullover shirt and jeans and tennis shoes. right? But when he spoke, he was capable of immediately captivating any audience that he was talking to. A level of intensity, a level of uh, thoughtfulness, and a level of genius all wrapped together. And you knew if you were going to sit down with Steve Jobs, it was going to be both engaging, exciting, and compelling. I'm going to use a negative example, and my apologies to all the Microsoft fans in the world, but Steve Ballmer would be my example of a negative brand persona, and I have no idea whether he created it on purpose or not. But I remember, you can see this on YouTube. There was one big corporate event that he went to, and he got up on the stage and he was bouncing around like a pogo stick for about 2 or 3 minutes, before he said anything. And he was screaming and yelling, and, I mean, it was like a carnival barker in the worst possible sense. And so, and yet, in his mind, I'm sure he thought that this was energizing and positive. And yet, to me, for better or for worse, I thought to myself, this guy's a raving lunatic. So, honestly, it's the difference between the two people is so profound and so different in outcome. Now, clearly, Microsoft had a huge successful company and still does. They're running neck and neck with Apple for the biggest company in the world. So they've survived Ballmer quite nicely. I'm sure he did a lot of good things, but the approach, the personal brand, is just nuts in my opinion. So, I mean, I'm bringing this out because I think very clearly how you craft your public persona is is powerful. It has an impact on people, the way people view you and on the way they view your company. And so I think the time, effort, and energy that you expend on crafting that approach can yield tremendous dividends. Now, whether in business, I don't want to go back and forth here, but can you give any examples of uh, showing how implementing a personal brand strategy made a substantive difference in a person's success?
I can. First, real quick, I just want to jump back on your examples and just touch on the Steve Ballmer example in particular and point out that I think, I don't know him personally, so I can't say for sure, but I think that what we saw there, that's what happens when your brand is not authentically you. When you're trying to do something or come across in a way that's not really you, that's not genuine. That's why we said back at the beginning of this conversation, it does have to be you. You do have to be yourself. Because if you try to put on something else that you think the audience wants and it's not natural to you, they can tell. And it doesn't go over well. Uh, and if by somehow you manage to pull that off, it's going to come through sooner or later. There are plenty of stories out there about companies that took a hit because their founder or their CEO had built up a brand persona that was one thing, and then something from their personal life came out that showed that nope, it was all a facade. And in those cases, I really think that sometimes it's as much about the facade as it was about um, whatever the bad thing in their personal life was that came out. It's because people felt lied to and they felt betrayed. I thought you were this, but you're really that. And they will not forgive you for that. People can forgive a lot of things. They'll forgive you for some mistakes you made in your past, but they won't forgive you for lying to them about it. Now, getting into some people that have made a substantive difference in their careers with their personal brands. I noted down a couple here. There's a brand strategist named Liam Darmody, and his story is interesting to me because his background was in revenue ops. And while he was still working in revenue ops, he began posting on LinkedIn about brand strategies and personal brands just because he found it interesting. It was just a hobby for him. He thought it was interesting, so he'd research and then he'd write about what he read. And he was actually offered his first brand strategy job without seeking it. He never applied because they had seen his content and said, yes, this guy knows what he's talking about. This is somebody who has good ideas. We want him on our team. And he's told them, he said, are you sure you're talking to the right person? Because I've never worked in brand strategy. They're like, yeah, we know, but you know it. So that's one example. Michelle Phan is another great one. She's the founder of her own cosmetics brand. She is the co-founder of Ipsy, which is a cosmetic subscription service. And she started by doing makeup tutorials on YouTube and built up her personal brand as just someone who enjoyed makeup and understood makeup and could talk about makeup, and also built up her following, her audience. She built up this YouTube audience of people who liked her, who trusted her, who believed she knew what she was talking about. So that when she was ready to launch her own product, she had people willing to buy it. Uh, those are some really strong ones. Anne Handley is another interesting one. Um, I love Anne Handley. I don't know her personally, but I love her content and her personal brand. So Anne is the chief content officer for Marketing Profs. And Marketing Profs is great, but it's Anne's personal brand and her content and reputation that she's put out personally. That's what's led her to being a best-selling author. That's what leads her to being a sought-after keynote speaker. If she comes up on a keynote or a speaker's agenda, it's not Anne Handley, Chief Content Officer at Marketing Profs. It's Anne Handley, content expert and best-selling author. Um, her personal brand is aligned with her employer, but it exists completely separate and independent from her employer. If Marketing Profs were to go bankrupt tomorrow, Anne would be just fine.
Well, those are some excellent examples. Thank you. Now, again, we were segueing a little bit towards business. So if we were in the SMB space, which is a place I occupied for a long, long time, uh, do you feel like a strong brand presence makes a difference? Because I've been to any number of small businesses where if you want to learn something about their company, you know, they might hand you just a document like this that doesn't look too polished, and they still manage to run their business and so on and so forth. But how does that face that you present as a small business impact your success, would you say?
Well, part of it is it's how you stand out, right? It's client attraction. If you don't want people to think about you as just a commodity or one company in a list of companies that do what you do, there has to be something that sets you apart. You don't want them to just have, well, you probably don't want your audience to just have a list of, oh, it's a list of accounting firms, and that's it. And that's what they're looking at. So branding is what sets you apart of where they're going through, okay, well, here's a list of accounting firms. Oh, this is the one that works with small business owners on tax strategies. Oh, this is the one that shares those funny tips and little videos. It's so for a small business, it's setting yourself apart as your this is the one who, and that sets you apart from the competition. It also helps with your customer retention because again, your brand is a reflection of personality. So you build relationships with your customers, and relationships drive loyalty. If a customer came to you only because you had the lowest price and the thing they wanted, as soon as somebody else has a lower price than the thing they want, they're gone. They don't have any loyalty to you because they don't even know you. You're just a provider of a thing.
And again, based on my personal experience, I ended up spending a fair amount of money building a brand look and messaging, to your point. And I'll tell you what my thought process was. Now, we were a small company, anywhere from 20 to 37 people, depending what moment in history you're talking about. But I wanted, we were going up against sales incentives is what we did. And we were going up against companies that had $1 and $2 billion in revenue. And my thought process always was, frankly, even though we're small, and being small can allow you to be intimate and close, which is a differentiator. But on the front end, when you're trying to win a client, I don't want them to be able to tell any difference perceptually, not conceptually, if you could understand the difference between those two. I didn't want my laying down a piece of collateral to make me look small. I wanted it to make me look great. Okay.
Hmm.
And so we spent, I think at the time, we spent about $175,000 working with a marketing consultant, a brand consultant, to talk to our clients, to understand how they perceived us, craft a new message, and craft a look that really looked fabulous. And I feel like it made a really big difference because we were able to close multi-billion-dollar clients many different times. And you know, you just can't underestimate how you don't want them to think of you as a non-entity.
Hmm.
You need them to think of you as someone that's a player, that's got great ideas, great execution, great delivery. See, so here I'm sort of rehashing those things that I thought were differentiators for us. And
Hmm.
at some level, once they figure out how big we were, it wouldn't become an obstacle at that point. It would become more of an asset than an obstacle.
Hmm.
So, I've seen so many small businesses with collateral that looks just ordinary to poor or underserved or doesn't exist. I've gone to and met with companies that have zero collateral. They have nothing other than their website, which today is probably the most important thing. But still, when you're face to face with someone, not only is your messaging going to be remembered, but what you have as a leave behind, even if they never read it, never open it, what you put down and the way it looks and feels will make a big difference in terms of where they position you. And I don't know if we directly said it or not. I think you certainly covered this point, but really you don't position yourself. Your clients position you. And so when they're done positioning you, you want to be in that upper right quadrant of high quality and high deliverables, as opposed to lower left of, just another ho-hum group of people doing ordinary things.
Hmm. Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. And I think it's something that a lot of small to medium businesses, they do underserve it. They underestimate the importance of it. Uh, they just see it as expense because it's one of those things that it's very tricky to try and draw direct attribution and have a direct, I spent X and I received Y return. That's my return on investment. It's tough to do that when you're talking about what's going on in people's heads. Um, but you're absolutely right that it does matter because what's going on in your customers' heads is the most important thing. And people just look at the cost and it's like, look, if it costs you to have a professional designer design your collateral, design just a template for your collateral that you can then reuse over and over and over again for all your different future pieces. And it's going to cost you some money. How many sales are you going to have to make to cover that cost? A tenth of one? One? I mean, if you put it into the context of what does it cost for me to look like I'm on par with the big boys, to be taken as seriously as the big boys, it's that the return is actually priceless. It's immeasurable what that kind of return you can get. So that I love the way you put it. By the time the customer realizes that you're a small business, it actually becomes impressive It's like, oh wow, I didn't realize they only had 15 people. Then they're doing this great work. That's incredible. How impressive.
Yeah, I'm reading a book about. I just finished reading a book about Google, and Google had very, very few employees, by 2000, let's say 1999, 2000. And yet they were already delivering massive results and massive skill and massive technology. I don't know about their marketing. I don't think they ever did much with marketing, but at the same time, just the underlying point is small companies can deliver great results if you can get in the door. And you have got to be able to get in the door. You have to be able to walk, talk, and chew gum like highly professional, highly polished organizations in order to really close deals and get to first base. And then, but it continues. It just continues because I think if we think about this really broadly, the way you engage with customers or clients, call them what you will, the way you engage with them is also a reflection of your brand, of the company, and you personally, your own personal brand. So you have got to develop the skills of high-end relationship management to deal with big clients. So you have to learn how to understand their goals. You have to understand how to listen. You have to understand matching up what you do to what's going to solve their problems. They don't, most clients don't buy your product, they buy solutions to their problem. And so you have got to learn to be able to position and describe and talk about what you do. You may do 50 things, but only two of them are relevant in that moment. And so I'm not trying to get salesy instead of brandy, but it's all part of the brand. Are you smart enough and astute enough to hear what they have to say and filter your conversation to meet the client need? So, that would be one of my recommendations is stop talking about everything and talk only about what's relevant, which
Hmm.
makes you much more professional.
Absolutely. And to your point, talk about the pain that you're solving. Talk about the problem. Don't talk about your 22-step process that you use to solve the problem. Just talk about the problem being solved.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I care about. I don't care if you go through 3 steps or 25 or 106. Can you solve my problem?
right, right. Or can you give me some completely new thing that's going to give me a new revenue stream that I never even thought about?
Hmm.
And at the same time as doing that, can you make it strategic? So all of those are great points to remember. So if I was again, I've been talking about collateral to a certain extent, but if I was a company today, a small company today, is there a particular focus that I might want to go after to develop my branding?
Um, I think that if you're going to try and choose a place to invest first, um, it's going to be in exactly what you mentioned, almost in passing, when you're talking about when you were building your brand for your former employer, George, is talk to the customers, find out what is important to them, because what's important to you might not be important to them. Um, I used to work for a flooring company that made industrial tile, so tiles for factory flooring. They had worked for decades in the automotive industry, auto shops. And auto shops loved this tile because it was really heavy duty. It wouldn't break. So that was what a lot of our marketing was built around. They had entered a space and selling flooring to food manufacturer, food and beverage, and breweries. And when I went and talked with those people, they didn't mention once the durability of the floor. They liked it because it was easy to clean. It was hygienic. It was a completely different message that this different audience needed. So we had to develop different collateral, different web pages, different so that we could talk to both groups of people because they were such different audiences. Um, so I would say as far as building your brand, now to dovetail all that back together, it all did come back to the company's brand, which was reliable flooring for manufacturing. Um, when you're building your brand, find out what is important to your customers. What do they need you to talk about? And look for gaps. If you look at what your competitors are all talking about, and then you talk to your customers, where is there a disconnect? I've never yet seen a case where everything the customers needed was being addressed in competitor marketing. Where is the gap? Where is something that they need or they want that nobody's giving them, that nobody's talking about? You can be that person and fill that space. It's really a lot easier to step into a vacant position than it is to try and wrestle a position away from somebody who's already got it.
So that's a really interesting point, and I could probably do an entire separate podcast on it. But what I think, in essence, you're suggesting is to become a thought leader in your field. And thought leaders, like Steve Jobs, find answers to questions people have yet to ask. And, while it's true we should talk to our client base and understand what they value in us, Steve Jobs' thought process always was market research is next to useless because the market has not thought of the problem I'm going to solve for them. And so that I mean he literally would tell people that, and I happen to agree with that in many ways. That again, we applied that ourselves. We looked at the incentive marketplace, and uh, we found a hole so big you could drive a truck through, and we developed a software product to solve that problem. Uh, After we sold the solution to the client, which is always interesting, is to build it after you sell it. It's probably, great and horrible at the same time. But, if you present an idea to someone important, especially really big, and this, by the way, was the biggest, the presentation was made to the biggest computer retailer in the world, and no one had ever suggested anything remotely like what we suggested. So we ended up building it in 8 months, and we went on to become a market leader. In fact, over my shoulder, you see the Inc. 500. We grew 473% in 3 years as a direct result of what I'm telling you about is identifying a market hole and building a solution that was going to solve that market hole.
Mhm.
So critically important to be a thought leader and to make sure that gets through. Unless you're selling nothing but commodities, the more you can be a thought leader, the better off you are,
Mhm.
would be my opinion. So we've covered a lot of ground here, Dana, and I wonder, is there any other point you'd like to bring out that we may have missed that's going to be quite relevant and important to our audience?
Um, I think there's one more thing I would like to bring up as it relates to business brands, not personal brands. Um, and that is that your brand is not just your marketing. It's not just the responsibility of the marketing department, and nobody else needs to worry about it. Uh, Brand is every interaction, every experience, every touch point that the customer has with your company. It's not just what you say, it's your whole personality, it's your culture. If you have a great message in your advertising and a terrible experience when somebody lands with customer service, you haven't built a brand. It's all got to be cohesive, and it needs to be built on who you really are, on your values, on how you do what you do. And everyone in the company has to have some kind of buy into it. They all need to at least understand it. And everybody that has any kind of interaction with customers needs to have some buy-in and understand why it's important.
That's a great point, and I could tell you I've lived both sides of that, and when you get on the negative side of that, it's just horrible. And the negative side of that, of poor client interactions, is pervasive today. And I have nothing against India or the Philippines at all, but large corporations have already, in most cases, outsourced all of their client support offshore. And I can't tell you how many phone calls I've been on where the person is somewhere like I just described, and they tell me about 5 times during the course of the conversation, I'm going to get finished with this call and be completely satisfied. But at no point do they actually solve my problem. And it's impossible, clearly the US management team is still the decision makers on everything, and it becomes impossible to escalate to the people that have the power to solve your problem. What a dissonant way to go to market. They spent
Hmm.
untold millions of dollars. I think a Super Bowl commercial this year was at what, 8 million for 30 seconds? It was
Something like that, yeah.
some big, big, big number.
And that's just for the ad time. That doesn't go into the production of the commercial.
Yeah, exactly. But they spend so much on creating an image through multimedia, and then the actual way you live the experience is just horrible. So that is a huge problem. I wish that either they have to give more authority to the offshore people or train the offshore people if that's what they intend to do, or like Apple to this day still has the best customer service of any company I've ever dealt with. And it's 100% US based, as far as I know. I've never picked up the phone and been offshored by Apple, and they will talk to me within 1 minute every time I call.
Hmm.
So they set the standard not only for product quality, but for customer support. So that is a brand that is absolutely golden, and I hope it stays that way. You just never know.
Yeah.
But I hope it stays that way. It's clearly very important to them, and likely to remain very important to them too.
And I don't know. I wonder, as you're saying that, if it's a result of offshoring or if it's a result of outsourcing in general. I mean, the when it's outsourced to a call center and those customer service reps, they don't work for this company. They work for a contractor of this company. They don't have any buy-in to the brand. They don't have any, they're not even probably aware of what the culture or the messaging or the brand is. They're probably taking calls for three different companies in this same shift. Uh, so there's just no connection there. And while I understand and support the idea of outsourcing, um, I think you need to think really critically about which functions you're outsourcing and how it's going to impact the overall experience of your customers.
I'm with you all the way, all the way. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we've had a great conversation. I think that what you offer is something very valuable. And let's say that someone would like to get in touch with you. How would they go about that? And we will post this at the tail end of the video, but how about giving us a little description of how to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. You can find me online on my website, which is danaherra.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Dana Herra. I'm the profile with the orange. And I have a weekly email that is called 10-Minute Branding that goes out every Sunday night. It is a branding mini lesson and an action item. So it's actual actionable. You can put it into effect in the next 10 minutes for the week ahead, branding tips. And you can find that. I'm sure you put the link. It's a little bit tedious to say URLs, but you can find that at the link in the show notes.
Wonderful. Well, we really appreciate your time. I'll give a 2-minute commercial for myself right now. Again, I'm George Kriza, that's been hosting the discussion. I am the CEO and managing partner of Challenging Decisions. which is a consultancy designed to assist uh, everything up to lower middle market CEOs with difficult decisions and thorny problems that they've had to solve and are not finding a clear path to solving them. And in that case, you'd want to call me, George Kriza, at 312-320-7760, or shoot me an email, diamond1@challengingdecisions.com, which is also our website, challengingdecisions.com. We both are delighted to have been with you today. And if there's anything either one of us can do to help you, by all means, please reach out. Have a great day. And thank you, Dana.